Good morning, and thank you for attending the NSCAA's 76th convention. My name is Dominic Casciato. I am Director of Coaching at Brooklyn Italian Soccer Club and a member of the NSCAA's 30 Under 30 programme. On behalf of the NSCAA, it is my honour to introduce Dick Bate, who is currently a technical consultant to FIFA, the Asian Football Confederation, and Burnley FC. Bate holds a degree in PE and education, and in the past has been elite coaching director at the Football Association, as well as technical director at Watford, Cardiff City, and the Canadian FA. Today, Dick will be discussing two approaches to defending early and defending late. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Dick Bate.
Thank you, and again, it's good to see you. Some people I've met many times before. Always good to reacquaint with you. Some people I've not met before. Thank you for coming, and you're welcome. Microphone. Is that better? No? Oh, okay. Now, did we put a man on the moon? Anyway, welcome to all of you. I said there's some faces I've met before, and it's nice to be reacquainted. Some people I've not met before, but welcome, and it's good to see you here, and thank you for coming. If at any time you want to ask anything that's not clear, or you just want to ask a question anyway, then please feel free to do so. It's basically to do for you. The session is for you. It's not for me. And they asked me if I'd do something on defending, which stumped me a little bit, because 2 years ago we worked in Philadelphia and we worked on defending there. So if anybody was at Philadelphia 2 years ago, you may find one or two things that we talk about similar to what we'll talk about here. But I've tried to steer clear of that. But how you talk about defending for 1 hour, I'm not quite sure. So I've had to chop up little bits and pieces here. And what we will do in the session this morning and the session we're working on the field tomorrow, what I don't cover this morning, I'll try and relate when we work with the players on the field tomorrow. So that's where we are. So please don't be afraid to ask any questions or ask for any clarification or to make any observations. They would be welcome. Right, so what are we going to actually try and do today? Well, we'll look at some things that are modern. We'll look at some aspects of defending. They said to me, what's your title of your session? I said, we'll do some work on defending. He said, well, can you expand on that? I said, okay, we'll do some work on defending early, and we'll do some work on defending late. Maybe we do that on the field when we do it in here, but we could start to think about those things here. But before we do that, there are certain things happening in the game today that if we are thinking about defending and defending as coaches, that we need to pay attention to. We need to heed in our thinking about the game. So, for instance, that for years and years and years has been where the goals are scored from. And I've taken these figures from the Premiership, and if I took the figures from the Premiership this season so far and go back another 4 or 5 years, it's the same every year. Those areas are where the goals are scored from there. So you can see the percentages and the different averages for the goals where they're actually scored. Now, as a coach of defending, right, you better make certain that you're absolutely spot on defending inside that area there in front of that goal. Are you going to zonal mark? Are you going to man mark? Are your players capable of marking? Because how many goals do you see where the markers just drift and are not au fait with where the strikers are or where players are coming from? But that's, you say, year after year, season after season, be mindful that that's where the goals are scored. And so you must work consistently, in my mind, on defending in those areas. So you can do your pressing in your one-on-ones and your two-on-twos and your three-on-threes and your small-sided games. But sooner or later, you're going to have to take your team, the back four, the midfield three, the midfield four, whoever it is, and really work to stop people getting the first strike in those particular areas. Now, as well as that, have a look at this one. This is a figure that a friend of mine put together for me. And what he's saying here is, the more you can keep people to take their strikes outside the penalty box, their chances of scoring would be a goal for every 11 strikes on target. Now, how many do you see that fly over the bar, go past the post and this, that and the other? But if you can make them shoot from distance, the chances, and this is making certain they get the strike on target, what you're saying is, look, you've got a chance of scoring 1 out of 11 strikes you take. However, if they were good enough to get into that prime scoring area, they are likely to score 1 goal every twice that they get a shot on target. So that's the importance and the vitality of being able, firstly, to defend inside that goal-scoring area, and therefore, secondly, preventing them from creating inside those areas there. Now, if I move that on a little bit, this is where the successful, I've called them goal zone entries, are made from. So in the game today, that area that I've circled for you, those are the major providing areas to the scorer himself. The area that has 28% is often known sometimes as called zone 14. The area in front of the penalty box, which today is probably the most significant area of all for providing the final pass or the final delivery to the goal scorer. So protecting that area is vital. The best team I've seen do it, protecting that area, Atletico Madrid, without a doubt. It's almost, and I don't know, it's almost as if Simeone has said to his 2 central midfield players, that area is your territory. No passes get between you, no passes get down the side of you, and we will defend when balls are played in from the flanks. But you make certain you seal up that area, the 2 of you. And they do it brilliantly. As well as that, we used to talk about long crosses being delivered and scored from long crosses, and they still are. But what's happened over the last few years, when I say that, maybe the last 5 to 10 years, more and more teams now are able to get into the area just inside the penalty box before they actually play the ball back. And it's almost as if Manchester City have got the habit of saying every time David Silva gets anywhere near the penalty box and gets into the penalty box, you look at the number of times that Sergio Aguero will simply pull off into that area, round about the penalty spot, for what you're calling these days a pull-back cross. So the long crosses, yes, you still call from those, not a problem, but more and more teams now getting inside the box. Arsenal were the best I've seen at it for a long time. They will work their way into the box, they will play their way into the box, and then they will provide people with shorter range passes, shorter range crosses, and finish in that major goal-scoring area there. So if we're familiar with that, which I'm sure you are anyway, but if you're familiar with that, then maybe you should spend more time defending in the penalty box and defending in that zone 14 area, that 28% area, and also marking inside that penalty box. Absolutely vital these days. Now, as well as that, it's really a repeat, but what I'm saying here, look, is this area here, this zone 14 area, you need to protect that well, and that's why I mentioned Atletico Madrid. Why is it called Zone 14? Well, there's some research done at the University of Liverpool. And what they did, they split the pitch up into 18 zones. 3, 6, 9 in the defending half. 12, 15, 18 in the attacking half. And that Zone 14, as it's christened these days, as I've said there, is a critical feeding area for the final pass made to the goal scorer. If we know about those things, surely we should be conversant about how we work to defend in those areas. Now, as well as that, these are the figures from goal scoring in the Champions League from the period 2011 to 2014. And in the last 2 years, it won't have changed significantly. Now, take your time and read those down, by all means. But what I've tried to do for you is to say, look, the absolutely pertinent factors for defenders I've highlighted in red for you. And we need to prepare defenders to be able to counter these things that are happening. So, for instance, I'll go down the red. How do you, as a defender or defenders, work against teams that play quick, one-touch, in and around that penalty box? How would you do it? Because you've got to produce players that can do it. What would it require? Well, for sure, it would require great agility. It would require great acceleration. It would require great ability to decelerate very quickly. Just pure agility would help you to start with. Reading the passes that are going to be made, which is difficult sometimes for sure. But you're going to have to develop those things with your defenders. In the build-up to scoring goals, nearly 40% of all possessions are one-touch. So are you going to press people high up the field and try and destroy the rhythm when they want to play one-touch? Or are you going to drop deep, set up a pool of players that they'll find it difficult to get through, and if they do get anywhere near it, there's always somebody closing from the back, and there's always somebody closing from the front. So how are you going to restrict the use of one-touch play in and around the penalty area for sure, and certainly in your own half? There's a big test for you. Zone 14, the area we've talked about there, twice as many one-touch passes than any other zone in the build-up play. Now, if that's the case, what are your midfield players' qualities that they're going to have to be able to resist people getting the ball into zone 14 and departing the ball from zone 14 into the penalty area? And I'm asking you simply to think as defending coaches now to say, look, if this is what's happening in the game today, in the Champions League, in the Premier League, and I'm responsible for developing players in my club in the United States that may well progress to play for the States and go into the World Cup, this is what they're going to be up against. So we might as well start preparing them now. And it really is about agility, quickness, speed, as opposed to having your big centre-backs that are 6'3", 6'4", can head it, but largely get bogged down when the play gets quick in and around their feet. Long-range strikes constitute 19% of all goals scored. 19% of goals are scored from crosses in the Champions League. Things like that. A goal is scored every 46 corners taken. So everybody, certainly in England, when there's a corner given, it's a goal nailed on. The crowd they get excited. There's great intensity in the crowd. But the actual times you'll score from a corner are very few, certainly if Arsenal play in the Champions League. So sometimes maybe the set piece on corners would be overrated. But as I say, these are things that are happening in modern-day football today. And if we delve into the attacking play that's taking place now in the La Liga, in the Premiership, in the highest levels of football, the chances are that you'll see these things taking place. Therefore, our defenders need to rehearse and to practice these things. So how do you cater for these things? So if teams are less predictable in their attacking play, which they are. There was a time 10, 15, 20 years ago where many teams were predictable. They were obvious. You knew what you were going to get, which in one sense made the defending easier. But nowadays, I don't know what you think. By all means, tell me whilst you're here. I think more and more teams in the attacking third are less predictable with their attacking play. There's more movement, both individual and combined, in the approach and penetrative play. So the number of times that teams take over, two players take over, or swap over, whatever you call it, over here. The number of times that Aguero will take one step forward, spin off and get round the back of you. The number of times that Suarez will change places with Neymar as and when necessary. How are you going to cope with their movement? Are you going to go man for man? Or are you going to pass them on? And that's a skill in its own right, passing them on. When do you do it? How do you do it? Where do you do it? What are you going to do in that respect? Final pass distances to scorers are reduced through passes that are hit with backspin. So if and around that penalty box you want to put somebody like Neymar in behind the defence, have you got players with the ability in your team to put it through with pace, but to put it through with backspin so as it holds up, it gets through the gaps between the defenders, and then it slows down for people that are moving onto it. And by the same token, have you got defenders that can read the play, anticipate the type of play that's likely to occur, and therefore be ready by adjusting their body, their feet, their hips, their head, and responding and reacting to the quickness of strikers around the penalty box and the delivery into those strikers. There's an increase in game intensity and athletic factors. More players running more distance. More players running more distance in terms of high-intensity running. I'll move on to that in a moment for you. The minimal touch play at high speed on the approach play in the last 30 yards of the pitch. There's more disguise and deception in movement and on-the-ball skills. So are we still teaching our players, and I'll say our, including the States, are you still teaching your players obvious passes? Or have you got players who learn and can hide their passes? So you look in here and the ball is going to be delivered there, like David Silva, people like that. Now, how do you teach defenders to cope with that? Do we teach them to read the play often enough? I don't find that happening. So these are the sort of things that are happening in attacking play now, that's taking place, that's changed, if you like, the vogue of the type of defender that you're going to have to produce. What's happened in the last 25 years in the game? These things. There's increased distances covered in all positions. So if you're a fullback, the amount of distance that you now run and occupy and cover both when you've got the ball, the team, and when the team doesn't have the ball is phenomenal from what it used to be. It's 50% more than in 1965. Now, I know for some of you that's a long, long time ago. That's 35, 45. You're not talking of 50 years. But the distances that have been covered in the last 50 years now, 50% more now than that time back there. So you've got a more athletic footballer these days, including the defenders. There's increased distance covers at high speed. There's increased speed and power, higher intensity. When you look at some of the physique of some of the players that play the game, and they are attackers with subtlety, cleverness, and wit. Their physique, magnificent physiques, they really are. And so the athletic qualities have been raised. The bar is right up there, including your defenders. Average number of high-intensity activities has almost doubled since 2002. So you're talking about a period of 15 years. The high-intensity work and the high-intensity activity has exploded in that short amount of time. And again, mainly, a lot of that is to do with the defenders. So we're producing a different animal, a different type of person that covers greater distances at higher speed, and so on and so forth. Increased resistance to injury, increased number of use of substitutes, all these things have come in the last 15, 20, 25 years. Let's move on quickly. Recently, a friend of mine sent me this research. Since 2007, this is 7 years in the Premier League here, look. What we're talking about is the athletic involvement. And again, I've highlighted in red for you what would be particularly specific to defending players. Fullbacks demonstrated the highest increase over the 7-year period in high-intensity running and sprint distance, covered both with the ball and without the ball, and recorded the highest maximal oxygen uptake. So what you're asking fullbacks to do these days now is way, way ahead of what you and I used to do many, many years ago. That's how much the athletic endeavour or the athletic capacity has moved on. The fullbacks covered more distance with sprints than any other position. Now, when you're working with your defenders, we usually work with them on defending, how often would you take them into the attacking sphere and work on those high-intensity runs over and over and over again, with and without a ball? Because that's what's happened in the last 7 years, certainly in the Premiership. The greatest increase in sprint distances was made by the fullbacks, 63% increase, and a 54% increase in terms of sprint distance by centre-backs. By centre-backs. Now, I'll bet that is in response to what attacking players have done. The ability to get over the distance of 10 yards high intensity, 20 yards high intensity, 30 yards high intensity running when you recover against teams that counterattack. But I would not have thought that those figures would tally against modern centre-backs and full-backs, but they are. That's what they're required to do in the modern game. And then finally, the physical requirements for modern soccer, particularly for high-intensity running, have evolved more for defenders than any other positions. So how much work are you doing? How much time are you spending working on your defenders, particularly on the high-intensity work, the short-range acceleration, all those sort of factors? Because that's what defenders are having to do today. And I don't think it's going to diminish over the next 10 or 15 years. It's going to get harder. Technical involvement, what's happening actually in the game itself? Well, again, you take your time, read the figures by all means. Players have delivered 40% more passes across the 7-year period. So the game is shifting and changing, which I'm sure you observe, no problem at all. It's become now a higher passing game. The volume of passes that are delivered now in games, phenomenal. And part of that is the build-up of play from defenders. And that's why I've said down there, the centre-backs displayed the largest increase in total passes recorded and pass success rate, especially short to medium-range passes. The number of times that centre-backs have to now pass the ball has increased by 60% over that short space of time, 66%. The pass receiving by centre-backs has increased by 109%. So how much time do you spend with your centre-backs and your full-backs receiving the ball and releasing the ball and running with the ball? Because those three major things are crucial if you're going to produce defenders for the future. Because that's what the stats are telling us, and that's the way the game's going. And that's just for your defenders. The wide backs recorded an increase of 25% in passes. And when you think of Daniel Alves, when he was at Barcelona Football Club, he personified exactly that. They recorded and they analysed all the actions and things that he did when he was at Barcelona. And he made more passes in the attacking half than any other player in the Barcelona team. And he's the fullback. And I don't know how the States play, I've not seen them play recently, but you look at the role now of the modern day fullback. They spend as much time in the attacking half as they do in the defending half. And these are the stock that we are talking about. These are our defenders. And they have to be able to perform capably, with great capability, in that attacking half of the field. And it never used to be the case. What else has happened? Technical features over this 7-year period. I'll leave you 30 seconds to go down through that. 38% more short and medium range passes over the last 7 years. Players with 70% pass success rate has decreased. 40% passes, I've said that. Nearly 20% more passes are now received by players. Now, all these things would be part of a defender's role today. And that's where we are. That's not opinion, that's fact. That's statistical analysis of where that game is. So how much work are you doing along those lines in developing your defenders, particularly from the attacking role, but of course in the defending role, those short distance that they have to sprint. Okay? Technically, summary for you. You can read that quite easily. Increased involvement by defenders in possession-based playing style and distance covered at high speed. That's probably the pertinent factor to remember. How much more centre-backs and full-backs these days are involved in and required to be top class when your team has possession and join in. Now, if I said to you, how's the game going to evolve in the next few years? So we're now in 2017. By the year's 2030, where's the game going to be? Worth thinking about. Because you then are saying, right, if the game is going to be quicker, if more and more distances are covered, if centre-backs and full-backs are now more often in possession of the ball and are required to play a high-intensity game, is it going to get slower? Is that going to get less or not? Or will it stay roughly the same as it is now, but there'll be more changes in tempo of the game? And that's for you to decide as a coach, to try and, in a sense, anticipate where the game's going to be in the next 15 years. And don't prepare your players for today. Having said that, you have to, because that's the environment in which they play. But can you make them ready to take place in the game in 15 years' time? Because it's shifting all the time. All the time. Preparing players for the future. That's your role. The question is now, are you preparing yourself and are you preparing for the change? What are the skills that are going to be vital in 15 years' time? What are the qualities that you as a coach will need to have acquired in 15 years' time? Players learn differently now. I was examining one of the lads on his A license recently. And he had his group of players, and there was a boy that didn't understand what the coach was talking about whilst he was working on the field. And I've never seen this before, but he's quite clever. So the coach ran off to the field, went to the halfway line, picked up his iPad, flicked through his iPad, took his iPad onto the field, showed it to the player, and the player said, "Okay, I understand." So rather than the coach who couldn't find the words to express exactly what he meant and could be understood by the player, he simply showed him, "This is what I mean." Now, are you going to be ready for that type of player? Or are you even doing it now? Because learning styles and learning skills, and therefore teaching styles and teaching skills, they are going to shift. Are you ready for that? So can you prepare yourself for 15 years down the line? And if you are going to say, yeah, I'll go for that, what's it going to involve? On the field, as a coach with your players. Off the field, as a coach with your players. Your emotional intelligence may have to be better, and I don't know what it's like now. Your interpersonal relationships with people need to flower. Your intrapersonal understanding of your own way of working, there would be something for you to think about. Your creative intelligence would be something to think about. So how much time do you watch American football with the viewpoint of saying, there's going to be something in this game that I can take and take back into the game of football? I worked in Canada for a year, and the two things I took home from Canada: ice hockey, probably the most boring game in the world I've ever seen in my life, only surpassed by curling. But there are some things in Canadian football. Look at the top left-hand corner. I don't know what they call them these days. Is it the wide back or the wide runner? Look at the runs he makes to try and escape. And the man defending against him, what are the movements he takes to defend against that? Look at the tennis players. Look at the feet movement. So are you prepared to step outside the game of football or soccer, whichever one you want to call it, and take lessons from other areas of sport and life to make you a better coach 15 years down the line? And specifically, what's going to change in the game? Exactly. Athletically, technically, tactically. Now then, an area of technical and tactical development that I don't see when I watch coaches work and I assess some of them, I very rarely see coaches teaching players to read the game. So what do I mean by reading the game? Well, it's the definition from UEFA, the ability to convert images, what you see, into messages that immediately transfers into action. I see coaches telling players what to do, and there's great value in that. I see coaches asking players what they think they should do, and there's value in that. I see coaches talking to players about how they could be better and do things differently, and there's value in that. But I can't remember the last time I saw coaches teaching players to read the game. So what do you mean by that? Because probably it's the foundation of being a good defender. Reading the game, what's going to happen, which will affect your position, which will affect your decision-making, which will affect everything to do with defending. So how often do you teach your defenders to read the game? When you look at your American quarterbacks, what's going through their mind? They've been doing it for years and years and years. But I'm sure some of these factors would be things that they would consider. Is it worth the risk of throwing that 35-yard punt, whatever it's called? Will I get hit before the pass is made? What's the state of the game now? Do I need to make a risky pass or should I run it? Can I actually deliver that pass? Now, those questions somewhere will be turning over cognitively, and he works out the right decision to come to. Now, would it be the same with young players that you're responsible for? Well, it could be, certainly with your defenders. If you're working with defenders, can you teach them how long they can look at the ball? How long can you look at the ball? So yes, you've got to be a ball watcher as a defender, because you want to know who's on the ball, what his likely intentions are. The question is, how long can you look at him, and what is it that you're looking at before you have to turn your head and look elsewhere? There's a question for him to think about. What are you looking at as a defender? What are you noticing as a defender? So you can look at David Silva with the ball, but what's going on here out of the corner of your eye? What are you noticing? And when you're teaching defenders, they will have a role, they will have a function, they will have a duty. There'll be certain things they have to do, but other things may start to impinge and cause a decision-making change. What would be those other things that they'd need to shift their thinking about in order to be a class defender? And the best defender I ever saw in my life, the Italian man, Baresi, Franco Baresi. He was wonderful. Great athlete, one of the quickest defenders I've ever seen off the mark, one of the quickest defenders I've ever seen over 10 or 15 yards. He could tie you down. He could maul you as a defender. He's only small, but he read the game so well. He knew what the player on the ball was likely to do. He knew what the player on the ball's options were, which was the most significant option that he would have to cover. So he may have to leave a striker in order to go there because he'd read what was likely to happen, made his decision there. So how much do you teach players to read the game? Be they in possession? What are the options ahead of you? What are the possibilities for you with your capability? And if you're the defender, where are your mates? Where are they? Where's the other defenders? Who's on the ball? Is he under pressure? What degree of pressure? What's the angle of the pressure? Can you teach them to read the game? And again, I see so many coaches saying, let the game be the teacher. Let them learn from the game. And it has value, but it can cause chaos. And I see so many coaches telling players what to do. which isn't wrong, because the experience comes in and can help them. So are you capable as a coach of mixing up all the different coaching styles? But for sure, unless they can read the game and understand the game, they're unlikely to be a great defender. Because for me, that's the foundation of it all. And those would be some of the questions that I think they ought to ask. Tony Strudwick, a lad who I worked with at the Football Association. Tony was, he's still there now at Manchester United, working in the athletic department at Manchester United. And he made the comment, eye movements of the elite class players are 5 seconds earlier than other players. Teach them to take their eyes off the ball, look elsewhere consistently. Could you get your players to learn to check that shoulder, that shoulder, that shoulder, that shoulder every 3 or 4 seconds? Could you do that? So as they get a picture of what's likely to happen, and then teach them the criteria for making the decisions that they actually make. The other one that he told me, Paul Scholes updates his position constantly. And Paul Scholes was one of the craftiest midfield players I've ever seen play. And I don't like Manchester United. They don't do anything for me. Any Manchester United supporters here? I can't believe it. I married a woman 25 years ago who was a Manchester United supporter. The marriage, okay. Being a Manchester United supporter caused all sorts of problems in my house. All sorts of problems. But there you are. I appreciate what Paul Scholes was. So, reading the game, crucial factor for me. Now, factors in decision-making for defenders. So if you're a defender, what's happening on the ball? Can you teach them to read what's happening on the ball? Who's on the ball? Now, some players that will play in the Premiership, and I'm not being naughty here, are what you might call ordinary passers. They are consistent. They'll find the target regularly. But you know what passes they're likely to make. They have I won't say a limited passing range, but a lesser passing range than the masters like David Silva and people like that. So who's on the ball? What's his capabilities? What's the flow and the direction of the play? Is it coming at us? Is it going across us? Is it going away from us? Because that'll affect all the decisions that he needs to make. What's the opponent's style of play? So you know that if a goalkeeper rolls the ball out to a centre-back, and that team is what you might call a direct playing team. In other words, they get from their goal to your goal as quickly as they can, as early as they can, which quite often will involve many, many long-range passes. You know what's coming. So can you read their style of play? As well as that, what's the likely passing direction and the intent of the player on the ball? David Silva gets it. He's likely to play it forward if he can. What's his intent? It might be to slip a ball between defenders, or it could be to put one over the far side fullback for the wide player to run onto. So what's his intent? So when you're looking at players on the ball, think about those things. If you're teaching players, read the pressure. Read the pressure. So if one of their players is under pressure from one of our players, is he likely to be able to escape immediately from that pressure? You might have to wait a few seconds to see the event. What's the angle of the pressure? Are they showing inside? Are they showing outside? Are they showing nothing? So teach them to read the pressure situation. The space behind the back line is a problem for back defenders, isn't it? So if there's no pressure on the ball, you can be exposed in that space between the defenders and the goalkeeper. How are you going to deal with that? Are you going to play a sweeper in that space? Are you going to get your centre-backs to get the shoulders turned, the hips turned, the head turned, and drop deeply? Or what? So if there's no pressure, first thought, protect the spacing behind the defence, whilst other people apply the correct amount of pressure. Thinking about the threat, if you're a back four player and there's no pressure on the ball, people come up with these rules, don't they? No pressure on the ball, back four, drop. Why? Why would we want to do that? No pressure on the ball, back player, drop. Only because there's a threat to the back. If there's no threat to the space behind your back players and in front of the keeper, why would you want to drop? Why could you not keep your back four up? Why could you not hold forward instead of dropping off too quickly? So teach them to read the pressure on the ball, angle, space behind, check it, any threat, no, hold our position. Threat, yes. Striker between the two centre-backs, that's a threat. Wingers coming in from the side and popping in behind you, that's a threat. Midfield players making a well-timed run, that's a threat. Then we may drop. So all I'm trying to say is, can we teach defenders to read the game, read the pressure, read the threat, read the situation, know where people are in order to help them to make the decisions that are necessary and are high priority decisions. As well as that, let's move on very quickly. So defending, things to think about as coaches about defending. Number one. So when does defending commence then? Does it commence when they come over the halfway line? Does it start immediately we lose possession? So question to think about, okay, when does defending start then? Where does active defending start? We lose possession, do we drop off? Do we let them come to us? And then we'll defend, for want of a better word, actively and aggressively. Or do we immediately put them under pressure? And these are the questions that you need to ask yourself with your teams. How does active defending commence? Are we going to press and show inside? Are we going to press and show outside? Are we going to leave the centre-backs with the ball? Because they can't really play. They're going to give it us sooner or later. So we might as well drop off and wait for that one. So how are you going to start this active defending? And what's involved in defending? So as a coach, if you're thinking about working on your defending sessions and getting your team to understand how you want them to defend, think about those questions. When do we start? Where does it start? How do we do it? And what is going to be involved in our defending? Now then, in terms of what, if you wanted a word, I think, that sums up good defending, it's about denying. Deny them everything. These things. Deny them space to play. Now, you might give it them, let them play in their half, but once they come over that halfway line, that's a war zone. Nobody. That is the war zone. We go to war there, and nobody has space in which to play. What else? It's about the denial of time. When we really mean it, put people under pressure, reduce the time that they can play comfortably, reduce the time that they have in possession, and force errors if we can. As well as that, it's about denying choice. If we put people under pressure, you're going to restrict the angles through which they can play, the options that they may wish to observe and to bring into the play, all those sort of things. As well as that, you're likely to deny them movement in possession and movement off the ball for other people because they just can't receive it because they're under pressure. So if you choose your own word, but for me, defending really is about denial of space, time, choice, option, movement, those things. Okay. It's about protection of high priority areas, isn't it? I've outlined to you this morning that area is zone 14, that central area just outside the penalty box. Could we deny them the opportunity to play in there on a regular basis? Could we deny them the space and time in possession if they were to get in there? Because that's a crucial feeding area. Could we force them into a wide position and we'll defend the crosses when they come in, like Atletico Madrid? So it will be about those sort of things. It's about deflecting opponents into well-defended or less important areas. So if you watch Atletico again, the midfield four is quite narrow when they play. The fullbacks are wider than the midfield four. Because the midfield four, basically, putting it very simply, are there to protect any central entries into that penalty box. They don't mind you playing wide because the fullbacks will get there quicker because the distance to get to the winger is there. And then a midfield player might join and double up. And then another midfield player may join and triple up. Now they basically want you to go wide. They'll trap you against the touchline if they can. And if any crosses come in, they defend well in those goal-scoring areas. So what areas are you going to allow them to play to? What are you going to deny them playing into? And are you ready to defend under those circumstances? So there'll be some things for you to think about in there. And it's a collection of players in vital areas, isn't it? It's a collection of, you need numbers in the box, generally speaking, unless it's a counter-attack. You'd need numbers in midfield. Things like those. When does defending start? As soon as possession is lost. As soon as possession is lost. And you might say it's even before that. I know coaches, excellent coaches, who when they work on their attacking play, they always make certain that they shut the door behind them. So in other words, if you lose possession around the halfway line, the other team can't break on you without you having enough numbers behind the ball to halt a counter-attack. So there's a thought. Yes, defending starts as soon as we lose it, with a change of attitude, a change of will, a change of desire, a change of activity. We need that. But the one thing we don't do is leave the back door open. So even when we're attacking, you need somebody to look after the back door. That's when defending starts in some coaches' minds. So as soon as possession's lost, then we'll defend. There you are, just what I've been talking about, jumped ahead. Okay? The will to defend mentally. And I'll show you a quote that Pep Guardiola has said recently, which I think sums it up very, very well. Have you got defenders that really want to defend, that can defend? I watch games like you will do on the television, and I watched a game against, it was Cardiff City against Derby County. Any Derby County supporters here? I didn't think there'd be any. So Derby County playing to play at Cardiff, and this was a championship game, and they were beautifully manicured. They played 4-4-2. So the two strikers knew what they were doing when the opposition had possession. The midfield players shaped up, into that lateral four. Nice shape amongst them. The back four was well organised. The distances between each other were fine. The distance between the back four and the midfield, they were fine, no problem at all. The goalkeeper's position behind the defence was good. And they looked very well manicured, very well coached in terms of position, distance, and movement. But when it came to putting a foot in, when it came to making contact with people, when it came to taking the ball off people with severe pressure and being prepared to make contact with somebody as you take the ball, they hadn't got that. They hadn't really got the will to defend. They had the shape, which helped them, but they didn't really have that ferocity that was absolutely necessary to be a good defending team. So you can have all that you want. You can work as long as you like on your shape, which is a great foundation, but you really need defenders with the will to destroy the opposition's possession. Now, do your players have that in your club, or is that something that's missing? What else? Crucial that you understand the defending strategy and the tactics. I see so many players running about, putting people under pressure. Great desire, terrific. Give them a round of applause. But actually, the team doesn't want that there and then. This is how we defend. These are the ingredients of how we want to defend against this opposition here. Now, we might go man for man. We might go zonal, whatever. But the players, when they defend, they need to fully understand the defending strategy and the defending tactics. And the great captains make certain that other players conform, generally speaking, to the way that the team wishes to play strategically and to play tactically. I mean, it's a massive, massive substance of defending. Players that can do that. As well as that, let me just move on quickly. Where does defending place? Well, where does it start? According to the location and the circumstance of the loss of it. So in other words, it could be that you have possession, you give the ball away, the other team intercept it, and there's space ahead. Bang, off they go. They can break quickly, no problem. Different proposition for you defensively. You may give the ball away, but you may be able to apply pressure straight away. Wholly different circumstance. So can you as the coach educate your players to say, look, under these circumstances, because we've just given the ball and they're breaking at us, they're likely to counterattack. The way we defend is going to be different from if we lose possession and we can get a player on top of the ball quickly and put them under severe pressure. One of the best teams I've seen recently over the last 4 or 5 years would be Germany. Germany are very good in the sense that they will keep the ball and they'll move it forward and they'll get over the halfway line and they'll leave 2 at the back and they've got the 2 midfield players ahead of them, Kroos and the other one I can't remember. Any German supporters here? I can't remember. So they've got the 2 centre-backs don't go too far forward. Okay, the 2 central midfield players don't go too far forward, but the rest of the team is prepared to attack right the way up to the attacking third. They lose possession, bang, They're in a position, because they've got the numbers up there, to apply immediate pressure. And I think Barcelona are of a similar ilk, where you take possession forward, take possession over the halfway line, take possession into the attacking third, and then when you lose it, because you've got the numbers up there, you can immediately apply pressure. Leicester City would do it differently. Leicester City would rely on Jamie Vardy up the front, and they'll win it. And if Drinkwater gets the ball in midfield, one of his first intentions is to put Vardy in behind a back four. And off he goes, and with his pace, he can cause all sorts of problems. And then they will push up in behind Vardy. A different style of play, but same sort of result. Once the ball is lost over the halfway line, they're in a position where they can press immediately. Other teams, no matter what, they'll drop, they'll let you have it, they'll let you come to the halfway line, or the halfway line plus 10 yards, and then they'll apply the pressure. So for different teams with different styles, and I don't know how you play with your team, question is, where does defending start? Immediately, high up the field, or let them come to certain positions as we reorganize ourselves, and then active defending really starts there. Okay? Where's the first aggressive defending line? So in other words, watch some teams, they'll drop immediately to the halfway line, and they'll defend from there. I'll tell you a simple story. We had the England under 18 team for a number of years, and we played Brazil, and we played them at Roker Park, which was Sunderland. And I'm stood in one technical area. The Brazilian coaches stood 15 yards away from me. And as soon as Brazil lost, I don't speak Portuguese. He was shouting, red, red. And obviously they'd worked it in training. And all the players pressed immediately high up the field. And then there were other times in the game, and Brazil lost possession, he'd shout, blue. And they would drop between the two Ds. In other words, the edge of the penalty area and the centre circle. The first defending line started there. The two strikers would drop to that position. And then there were other times when he shouted, green. Or so he told me anyway. Green. And they dropped to the halfway line. And they worked on that in training. He'd just work off colours. Red, yellow, green. Red to that team meant full court press. Yellow meant between the two Ds. That's where we start. Blue meant halfway line. And I spoke to him after the game, and this is what he explained to me. And this is what they did in training, so that they had that ability and that facility to defend high, medium, or low. That's where they started their defending. That's why I asked you the question, where does defending start? Could you work on that with your players? For sure you could. Okay. How? Depend on those factors there, wouldn't it? If passes are intercepted, you might have to recover urgently. If the ball goes out of play, put them under pressure. You can almost go man for man, high up the field. If you mark aggressively and you mark tightly on throw-ins against you, the stats will tell you you are likely to regain possession 6 times out of 8 throw-ins. You'll take possession back within 3 passes. Within 3 passes. So if you mark tightly and you spoil their possession from throw-ins, you're going to get 3/4 of that ball back within 3 or 4 passes. Try it. Try it and see what you think. So things like that. If you're outnumbered, you might withdraw to the halfway line and defend from there. So all I'm saying to you is, look, ask yourself that question. As a coach, and I want to work on defending, where does it start? When does it start? What's involved? And how do we do it? And there's just a thinking outline for you, as you like, if you're a coach that's making his way in the game. Okay, let's just move on quickly. Effective defending, basically, for me, involves these things. Your attitude to defending. Have you got players that really want to defend? That really want to defend and are prepared to defend for the team? And have you got that allegiance to the overall defending strategy? This is how we defend. This is where we start. This is what we do. This is what we, etc., etc. Have you got players with that allegiance? Because if they don't, if some of them don't fancy it, you're opening doors for them, the opposition, to expose you. Positioning and reading the play. or vice versa, reading the play and positioning. I think that's crucial. And again, I've mentioned that I don't see too many coaches teaching players to read the game, which in my opinion is the foundation of all good defending. Understanding of the defending strategy, doing it, execution, individual initiative. There are times where somebody may just break out of the shape to put somebody under pressure. And it surprises the opposition. And that is well within, obviously, the strategy and tactics from time to time. Prioritising roles, because they'll keep changing roles, won't they? So your centre-backs will sometimes get drawn out wide, sometimes they'll go into midfield to defend. And having that, in a sense, flexibility from a sensible decision that's been taken under those circumstances. And of course, they need to change the roles and functions, don't they? So I think those things would be involved in effective defending. Okay, let me just move on quickly. Now then, Arsene Wenger said this. He's deeply convinced that top-level sport is about leaving the past behind you and focusing on what's ahead, which to me sounds sensible. If that's the case, if I said to you, and I've already posed the question to a certain extent, where's the game going? What's going to happen, do you think, in the future? What would you say to me? General football. On the field, inside the four lines, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to be even less predictable. Okay? What else do you think? More speed? What do you mean more speed? What do you mean you play faster? What do you mean boom, boom, boom? All right. All I'm trying to say to you, what's going to be faster? Well, the speed of players moving will be faster. I'm sure you're right. The speed of the ball between players will be faster. I'm sure you're right. The time that you have in possession will be less, I think. I'm agreeing with you on that. So if you look at the German coach, he said, look, we're working with our players now to reduce the time between his first touch and his pass to less than 2 seconds, which is probably part of when you say it's going to get quicker. That's part of it. So the time between your first touch and your release of the ball or your next touch, trying to reduce it almost to 1 second. And in that sense, I'm agreeing with you. It will be speedier. So a lot of things will be speedier. But there'll be a limit as just to how quick you can play, won't there? It's like the sprinters. They will have a certain threshold that they can get up to, but chances are they're not going to go too far beyond that. So it's going to get quicker, and I'm agreeing with him. Question, what's going to get quicker? Players over the distance? Yes. Decision-making may have to get quicker for sure. Technical excellence will be quicker. Take the ball in, load it off, going to be quicker for sure. He says more variable. What else do you think is going to change? One more, then we'll move on. Greater player interchanges. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm understanding. I know where you are. So he's talking about greater player interchanges. Movement. More movement. I think more individual movement, and there'll be more combined movement, whether it's in twos, threes, or whatever. Quite agree with you. I suggest some of these things. It will be faster, which we've just agreed on. The ball speed between players will be faster. Player movement, I think, will be faster. Decision-making will have to be quicker. Tactical implementation will have to be quicker. If we're going to counter, bang, we've got to go rapid. If we're going to build up quickly, we've got to be rapid at it. Can't spend too much time on the ball, although we'll consider times where we will slow the game down deliberately. It'll be unorthodox. I think there'll be more players who are unexpected, unusual, and complex skills will be necessary. What else? It'll be varied. The game tempo will be varied. We'll need to be able to play at the highest tempo and at lower tempos. And, of course, medium-range tempos. Having that ability to control the game with whatever's necessary when we're in possession. I think it'll be like that. I think it'll be more intelligent in the sense of rapid, individual, team, tactical decision-making. I think that'll be the case. I think there'll be more players who will be able to hide their intention. And that'll be particularly useful in certain parts of the game. Anywhere around that penalty box and you have possession. If you broadcast what you're going to do, you're helping defenders to read the game and pick you off. If you've got players who can hide what they're going to do, and I've used David Silva this morning, Maradona was another, what's his name, Messi, and all they can all do it. Look one way, play the other. Shape your hips one way, make certain the ball goes the other. I think disguise will be there as well. I'm sure it'll be there. I think it'll be possession-based. I think you might get one or two more teams direct, but still possession-based. But there'll be more and more passing. You've seen the amount of passing that's increased, the number of times centre-backs and full-backs are going to be involved in possession. We've talked about that already. And I think that's only going to be more elevated. I can't see that coming down. Probably going to be more inventive, in the sense that you're going to have to sign more Uruguayans, more Chileans, more Bolivians, more Ecuadorians, who don't know what they're doing and so nobody else does. And I'm not being disrespectful. I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about. Very unpredictable players, great players, but you can't quite predict what they're going to do. I think that'll be the case as well. I think there'll be more universality in the sense that more players will be able to operate effectively in a variety of different positions. I think that's coming. It's here now. It's here now. Yeah. Somebody who says to me? More diverse in terms of? Yeah, more possession with a purpose. There are different ways of finding your way through the opposition towards goal. Yeah, I think tactical innovation will be there as well. Instancy. You're going to have to do it now. If that ball comes into you, it's got to go to where you want it now. It's got to be perfect now. Not when you've had one touch and a second touch and you dismiss it on the third touch. You've got to be able to play that one touch with any part of your body, any time it comes into you, and make certain it gets to where it's going to go to. Now, if you say, look, there's some substance in those views, and like my friends down here have helped and over there, what do you think the game's going to be like? So how are you going to prepare your players at the level that you work with them now to make them better players, pushing them towards the top end of football in the United States or Canada or wherever you come from? If that's the case, how are you going to do it? And how is it going to affect, specifically, your defenders? All right? So what are your defending implications if that's going to happen? What have you got to do with your defenders? How are you going to make them quicker? How are you going to make them quicker thinkers? How are you going to get them to operate in these variety of different styles of play and in different tactics and strategies? How are you going to do it? Now, that's the challenge that you've got as coaches. So what are going to be the defending implications? What do you think? So what are defenders going to have to do then, if that's the way the game is going to go? Could be. Okay, so he's saying fullbacks won't be quite as adventurous. They'll be a little bit more cautious in going forward. Okay, what else? What else? Yes, sir. Oh, okay, fine. He's saying there, the more you teach them to read the game, probably the better decision-making they can make under different circumstances. What else? For defenders, it's going to get quicker. There's going to be more interchange. Got to be able to play one touch. Different styles, different phases of play, things like that. What else? More athleticism. I think you're spot on. Yeah. If you said to me, what do you think? And again, you make your own mind up. These are just my thoughts. You're going to get longer defending phases of play. If teams are going to keep the ball more and keep the ball more efficiently, and you're talking about, if you were to play Barcelona, they're stacking up 600-700 passes per game. Now imagine having to defend against teams like Barcelona who keep it and keep the ball moving. And they can play one touch, they can play two touch. You're going to have to defend for longer phases of play. And if that's the case, concentration levels, team discipline, the will to do it, team organization, going to be absolutely fundamental for defenders. What else? More defending decisions and directional changes per game. So that's the cognitive factor, but it's also an athletic factor. You're going to have to develop that ability to change direction and change the plane at which you defend. That'll be there. More split-second decision and directional changes. An increased demand for mobility range in your lower body. All these things. Increased demand for your lower limb and your foot speed. You've got to shift your feet quicker and shift your legs quicker. If that's what's going to happen, if we're right in our predictions, that is going to affect what we have to do defensively. Increased defending intelligence. You see, I think good defenders, I think they know everything and they've got a big mouth. Now, if you're in England, I don't know what it's like in the States. In England, if you know everything and you've got a big mouth, people don't like you. But great defenders do. They know everything that's going on because they scan and they have a look and their perception is good and their prioritizing is good. And they've got a big mouth because they can organize people that aren't doing the jobs properly. And I think that's part of good defending. So I think knowing what's going on, being able to provoke others to what's going on and getting it right, that'll be a crucial factor going forward. So I would suggest to you that some of those things, if not all of those things, would be things that actually you might worth thinking about if you're going to work with defenders. I've put down there different defending phases. Defending against counterattack. Defending as a deep block, where you put 8 players plus the keeper in your own defending third. A different phase of defending. Also, what's happening at the moment, high pressing tactics. Now, pressing's been around for years and years and years. High pressing has been around. But all of a sudden, high pressing has become the fad. It has become the vogue for defending these days. And what I'm saying is this, look, yes, I'll give you some thoughts about this. Manchester City played Barcelona recently. And these are the figures here. In the first half, there were 28 distributions by the goalkeeper to receivers in the defending half. So in other words, the goalkeeper got it, threw it out. Because everybody now has to play what you might call pretty football, or proper football, as people call it. You've got to play out from the back, and people are obsessed with it. If you do it well against teams that want to do that, these are the sort of figures you can get. In other words, with a high press, probably similar to what you call it in basketball. So in this game here, Barcelona-Manchester City, first half, 28 distributions by the goalkeeper to receivers in the defending half. Only 5 out of those 28 possessions moved into the attacking half. Because City pressed and pressed and pressed and pressed and reduced them to those figures. Yes, sir. No, this was just Manchester City pressing against Barcelona. Okay? So high pressing now, I mean, the ones that want to play out from the back, the coaches that want to play out from the back, they've had a great time over the last 5 years. Because nobody's really said, look, we'll let them do it and we'll drop off. But all of a sudden, a number of coaches have said, no, let's go and stop them. Let's go and stop them starting their attacks. And we'll talk about that tomorrow when we're down on the pitch. Let's go and stop them starting. We might give you the first pass, goalkeeper, that you play out to the centre-back, and then we're right on top of you. Or other teams will say, no, you're not even going to get the first pass from the goalkeeper. We are going to high press you. And those are figures from Barcelona and Manchester City. And Jurgen Klopp, this is a statement that he made, winning the ball high up the pitch is far more productive than a number 10 unlocking a defence with a killer pass. Now, this is his opinion, okay? The Liverpool players will aim to press City. So this game took place about, 2 or 3 weeks ago. They'll have worked in training on their position to stop Guardiola's side from passing the ball out from the back. If City can pass the ball well enough, which they didn't in the first half, they'll take the sting out of Liverpool by making them chase the ball. Okay? Well, in that game, this happened. Liverpool played City. Only 13% of attacks started by the Manchester City goalkeeper with a throw-out into a receiver in the defending half, took possession into the attacking third. Now, that's how successful Liverpool were against City. And that's how successful City were against Barcelona. So when I've said you're going to have to work with players defending in different phases of the play, do your players understand, a bit like Brazil, when I was telling you about the Brazilian coach, do your players understand how to high press, which is a common tactic these days now, a lot of teams are starting to do it, and do they understand how to drop off and defend? What's the differences? Sooner or later, you're going to have to press somebody. And there's more and more teams now, if you watch Premiership football, Tottenham do it very well, who will stop you trying to play out from the back. And the question is now, as a coach, do your teams do it? And if somebody did it to you, how are you going to play against it? So when I said high pressing, there's some figures from recent games there. And that's what I mean by high pressing. That's a back pass to the Barcelona goalkeeper. And there they are, players putting them under pressure, as high as that, almost man for man, as you can see. Tottenham doing it against Chelsea, where if the goalkeeper picks the ball up, he has a look and he says, that's a risk. Nope, not interested in that. I can play that one because they've let me play that one. But you can rest assured that if I play that one there, he's immediately going to be under pressure. And we'll have a little look at this tomorrow when we go and work on the field there. Now, just to finish off, I don't know how long I've got. How long have we got? We're done. Right, well, this I can't cover down on the field tomorrow, so are you sure we've done?
Yeah, you can carry on. I don't think anyone wants you to stop. So.
Well, who's next? Is somebody else coming in here to start? Right, okay, very quickly for you. I think this is the way it's going to go from here on now. I think you're going to get more and more teams with this staff structure. So if you go in the Premiership now, or you go in La Liga now, you go in MSL now, I'm not quite sure. It could be that you have what you call a performance director, and you'll have a technical director working alongside you. And then you'll probably split it up, I think, like they do in the NFL, where you'll have defensive coordinators, attacking coordinators, you'll have defensive coaches, etc., etc., etc. I think that's the way it's probably going to go. Now, if that's the case, I'd ask you this question. What do defenders actually do athletically? What do they do? It's not a trick question. What do they actually do, defenders? Just throw them out at me. Athletically, I'm talking about. Well, there is an athletic component, of course there is, but yeah. But what do they actually do athletically? Accelerate, decelerate, what else? Jump, 1 foot, 2 feet, moving forward, moving backwards, moving sideways. What else? Change direction. What else? Sorry? Drop, moving backwards, yeah, at speed, things like that. Yeah, I think it'll come to these things. They'll do all these things here. Maintain balance, make and take physical contact, change the plane at which they move. Sometimes they'll be up, sometimes they'll be down. They'll decelerate, they'll challenge for the ball, they'll jump, all those sorts of things. All those sorts of things. And the best teacher of the game I've ever seen in my life was my first boss at the FA, and he said that. And I don't see that these days as much as it should take place. The art of coaching is lost when coaches fail to realize the depth to which the game should and must be taught. And I see a lot of that these days. Don't see it happening enough. And the point I'm trying to make is this. If you're going to develop your players at your clubs, do you think about these things here? Do you train the movement patterns? Are you conversant with the biomechanics of all those things that they have to do? So if you're talking about the football speeds, are you working on all those things? Teaching people to read the game, perceptual speed, anticipation speed, decision-making speed, all those sorts of things there. Are you thinking about position-specific movements? And this is a magnificent figure. That it's not, well, it is related to football, for sure. You talked about acceleration and deceleration and all those sorts of things. I didn't realize this. Well, the physio at the club told me about it. He said, look, do you understand that Usain Bolt, in the first 3 strides that he takes, generates 60% of his speed? Now, we know he's not playing football. But if you're going to work with your defenders or any players in your team here, how important is acceleration going to be then? And how well versed are you in the biomechanics of getting people to start quickly? And more times now, players are starting a sprint from an explosive start as opposed to a run-in and then acceleration. So that's how important getting off the mark is very quickly. So I'm just saying to you, look, all these things, are you really into all these things? Do you understand about balance and all the things that's involved in balance? What would you teach your players technically? So in other words, what are the things that you do with your centre-backs? Position-specific work with your centre-backs. Would you cover all these things? As well as that, on and off the ball. Okay? Do you teach them to read the game? Those, for me, would be your major technical issues that you need to work on with your young players at your clubs. Defenders, and I'm only talking about defenders now. Well, of course, some of it could transfer into other players that aren't classified as being defenders, for sure. So, how much detail would you get into? Would you get into tactical intelligence? Those things, playing in different systems, playing as 2 centre-backs, playing as 3 centre-backs, all those sort of things here, and I'll finish on this. And what about the psychological attributes? Hugo Montero, anybody here from Uruguay? Okay. Hugo Montero was one of the best defenders that ever played for Uruguay. And he simply came out with the fact, I was born to defend. Now, we've tried to talk about defenders this morning. I've talked about attitude and will. He certainly had the will because he thought he was born to defend. What a great attitude. And the final thing, there was a gentleman called Sean Fitzpatrick, who was the captain of the All Blacks. Now, I'm not being ridiculous here. Do you know who the All Blacks are? Yeah, okay. Great New Zealand team. The winningest team ever in sporting history. Has a track record of an 80% win percentage in all the games that they've played. He came to Watford when I was at Watford Football Club, and he talked to us about everything that the All Blacks stood for. And I'll recommend a book to you. It's called Legacy. And it's about the All Blacks, their values, their operating values, all those sort of things. It's called Legacy. Well worth a read. And the All Blacks were schooled in the mantra, you have to love not having the ball. Now, how many of your players love not having the ball? Because they're your proper defenders. So as a coach, and I'm sorry we've had to finish, as a coach, are you doing these things? Are you looking into these aspects, teaching your defenders technically, psychologically, tactically, and so on and so forth? How's the game going to change? How are you going to have to change? And what's going to be involved? What are the factors that are going to change that you have to be with? I have to finish there. We'll continue tomorrow down on the field, and we'll take some of these issues forward. Thank you.
I didn't want to end you.
Always a pleasure.